Laura, my last year in college was full of challenges, which I will talk about later. I managed to maintain a 3.5 GPA toward graduation, but just barely. I was accepted to Princeton, but turned it down, choosing to attend UCLA. I went to private schools in New York all my life. Believing that Princeton would be another extension of the private school prison, I convinced my parents that if, after a year at UCLA, I did not demonstrate my maturity and good grades, I would return east and attend a more traditional college, more fitting of my parents' legacy. In the first year, I showed a very decent average score 3.85. Feeling triumphant when I met my parents during summer break, proud that I had mastered the core curriculum, I insisted on continuing my education on the West Coast. They reluctantly agreed because I had met the minimum terms of our agreement. They gave in, but were not happy. I was delighted. I studied and at the same time spread my wings of independence. My mother, always practical and cunning, tried to lure me with shopping trips in New York and other social events required in her circle. I politely refused, showing my naivety. What could be better than enjoying the delights of life in the protected cocoon of money? Youth is truly wasted on the young. Returning for the second year, I realized that I had missed some freshman antics, as my father called them. I never needed to be defiant in my first year, as my parents probably thought. I vowed to fix that this year. I didn't plan on going crazy like my roommate Sheila, who was partying every week without fail, but approaching my 20s, it was time to have some fun. Sheila had always been popular with the boys, no doubt for her freer morals than I could afford. I was not a prude, since I was already an adult by that time. I just wasn't comfortable jumping from one bed to another in order to be popular by student standards or the life of the party by social norms. I was more selective in choosing partners and generally more reserved. I've had a steady boyfriend for the past year. I suspect my mother knew about this, or at least had strong suspicions. Father, as usual, was not aware of such things. After starting classes in my second year, I decided to change my bookish look to a more stylish one, corresponding to the 80s. At the time, I looked like a younger version of Linda Gray from Dallas, so I thought styling my hair like her would help me stand out and fit in at the same time. At that time, big hair was in fashion, which took hours to style. I didn't want to burden my daily routine with that much effort, so I opted for a straighter hairstyle with messy blonde bangs and shoulder-length hair. I combed them to one side or the other depending on my mood. It suited me at the time, combining my new hairstyle with my light brown eyes. I felt attractive. Men definitely noticed this. I seemed to be fending off suitors left and right, in and out of class. Several of the more progressive professors thought I needed extra help, which they were happy to offer in their offices after class. I politely refused all their offers. I was raised as a lady, and as such I appreciated their attention, but I felt obliged to choose my companions at my own discretion. About halfway through my sophomore semester, I met a gentleman named Warren Blaylock. He seemed pleasant enough, if a little aloof at the time. He didn't seem as fascinated by me or my appearance as the others, including the professors. There was something a little mysterious about Warren that intrigued, if you're honest with yourself. I couldn't figure out what exactly. Warren was in my Psychology 201 class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I passed Psychology 101 with flying colors. I signed up for this course thinking it would be an easier to help maintain my GPA. My parents expected me to major in medicine by mid-year. I hesitated between medicine and law. Thinking I could go in any direction, a psychology course seemed like a good choice. Warren asked smart questions during class and even after, when I would accidentally bump into him by dropping the books he was picking up. Of course, he apologized for his awkwardness, which I humbly rejected. As an apology, he invited me to coffee at the student union. Of course, I agreed because that was my plan. Luckily, Warren understood the program after our slightly awkward introduction. We went to the student union, talking about our majors, professors, student life, and other innocuous topics. The conversation over coffee seemed relatively easy for me, but we did not discuss détente, but only his poor student life. I found out that Warren is poor. It's not that poverty is a death sentence or anything wrong. It's just that there has been a lot of wealth in my almost 20 years of baseline. Finding out that there are people who have to work for a living was a shock to me. Looking back, I see how ignorant I was about the world. Before the cries of spoiled rich girls start, remember, I led a very sheltered life, attending private schools, with nannies, maids, butlers, and drivers all my life. My first year of college was all about studying and not partying like most normal freshmen. So yes, money was a given. I was spoiled by it to some extent, but I thought I remained relatively grounded in my goals, pursuing a bachelor's degree despite this. I could tell Warren was interested, well, maybe a little, or so I hoped. I was interested. He was tall, definitely over 6 feet, slim, although I couldn't guess his weight, and seemed well built, with blue eyes and relatively short blonde hair. Warren said he doesn't have time for sports, as he either has to work as a waiter at a local restaurant or as a bartender at one of the local sports bars almost every night. One thing that really puzzled me was his dream, as he called it, of becoming rich. I was probably dismissive of it after a life of wealth, but for someone who didn't have it, the dream made sense. He seemed obsessed with computers, which began to permeate the fabric of society in the mid-80s. When we finished drinking coffee, Warren didn't offer to walk me to the apartment I shared with Sheila or ask me out on a more formal date. I wasn't offended, just more intrigued as to why my charms didn't seem to work on him. I took it as a personal challenge to get him interested in me, at least enough for him to agree to a second date. When I returned to my apartment and saw Sheila, I started talking to her about Warren. Given Sheila's backstory, which we both knew well, it was obvious why I was asking. Sheila, is there something wrong with me today? Do I look okay? No, honey, you look great. Why do you ask? Sheila was very laid back, originally from Georgia. Her accent sounded like sweet southern honey. Perhaps it was one of her charms that attracted all the guys on campus. I just had coffee with a guy from my psychology class. It felt like he was there, but wasn't particularly interested in me. You mean you found the only guy on campus who doesn't have a crush on you? Sheila laughed loudly. Well, Laura, you know how to choose. She continued to laugh until she doubled over. This was starting to irritate me. This was becoming a blow to my pride, I thought. I don't know, maybe. But Warren seems different, not because he didn't prostrate himself in front of me to get into my pants. Maybe he likes men, girl. Have you thought about that? This shocked me. I didn't think about it. But in the 80s, being this way openly was a relatively new phenomenon for mainstream society. I suppose it's possible that he prefers men, but I didn't think so. It's not like I had any kind of radar, as it was sometimes called. He just didn't give off those vibes that would say, I prefer guys. No, something else was at play here. I was sure of it. Well, no, I didn't think he liked men, but I didn't get that feeling. Any other ideas? I asked, really grasping at straws as I had never been rejected like that. It was polite, but clearly not the reaction I expected or hoped to get from Warren. Listen, Laura, if you're looking for emotional support from me because your panties are in a twist over some guy you just met, I'll give it to you, honey. If I'm a 7 or 8 out of 10, then you definitely 11. Don't worry, honey, maybe he's just not interested in you. Damn it, I'd sleep with you myself if we were both like that. I knew she was joking with her last remark. We both knew that neither of us were built like that. I think it's possible. It's just never happened before, Sheila became more serious. Relax, Laura. There are over 30,000 students at this university, and from what I'm told, there are quite a lot of guys there. She started giggling before continuing, I'm sure you can find one guy who wants to date you. Don't push yourself too hard, okay? Yes, of course. I think you're right. I left the conversation with Sheila, but I couldn't let it out of my head. Classes and life continued until the end of the semester. I smiled flirtatiously at Warren in psychology class, trying to sit closer to him without being too obvious. He returned my smiles, but never initiated a conversation until the end of the semester. Finally, after finals, having closed my blue books and turned them into the department, I needed the answers before I went home for Christmas break. Warren, do you have a minute? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? I opened my eyes wide in anticipation, trying to be as flirty as possible, hoping that he would accept my sincere offer. I have another exam in 2 hours, but I think I can spare some time for coffee. He finally answered after thoughtful consideration and checking his watch. And again I thought, damn, what do I need to do to get this guy's attention? Warren continued to ponder. Actually, the student union is on my way to the next exam, so yeah, let's go. Laura, right. Damn, he's checking my name. I mean, seriously, I clearly had a complex at that moment. I was clearly out of my depth, but I was determined to understand this reverse falling in love with myself. I brushed my teeth this morning. My hair was neatly styled. I was wearing skinny jeans and a cute blue silk blouse with conservative 2-inch sandals. I even put on a little makeup to highlight my eyes and blush on my cheeks, as well as some light gloss on my lips. I was far from terrible. I rocked on my heels, answering condescendingly, "Yes, this is Laura. Thanks for remembering." We walked to the student union, discussing the psychology exam. I wanted to wait until we started drinking coffee to begin my interrogation. Over coffee, I was literally torn to start asking questions. I remembered his clarification of my name, which worsened my mood even more. I simply blurted out, perhaps too loudly, "Do you like men?" He immediately looked up from his coffee, looked around at everyone, then burst into the deepest laugh I've ever heard, lasting a good 15 seconds before he replied, "No, I'm just not as stupid as I seem." What's that supposed to mean? Laura, believe it or not, I know why you're asking. At least I think so, now that I think about it. Please continue because I still don't understand this. Look, let's get this straight. You want to know why I didn't notice you, talk to you, ask you out, or try to get you into bed, right? I had a deer in the headlights look as I said, "Yeah, I guess that's about it." "Elementary, my dear Watson," he replied, imitating his best Sherlock Holmes. "You're smart, so I'm sure you'll understand, but you're too beautiful and too rich." Now my spirit has really lifted. In a whisper that only Warren could hear, I said, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" "Sorry, I thought it was obvious. Let me make this clear. You should know that you are an extremely attractive woman." He paused for effect, allowing me to absorb his statement. "To ask if I like men says you can't handle not being desired, pursued, or courted, right?" "Yes," I answered directly, while he seemed to read my thoughts, which was a little scary. "And you're rich, right? I mean, you don't work. At least it didn't come up during our last coffee, which means either you have a trust fund or mommy and daddy have enough money to keep you in this outfit that probably costs more than I make in a week. My parents have money, so you think I'm attractive, but you still haven't talked to me all semester after I purposely bumped into you. I know I gave away more of myself than I intended, but I needed him to see that I was definitely interested in him, as if he didn't know it. I was starting to sound like a teenager in love. Well, thanks for clarifying. I really thought I took the clumsiness pill back then when you dropped your books after barely bumping into me. His arrogant attitude towards me was really starting to irritate me. Who is this poor student to practically insult me with the truth about my wealth and then have the audacity to give me an indirect compliment about my appearance? Outrageous, unsatisfactory. I think he put me in my place, now that I think about it. No one had ever talked to me like that before, especially someone who didn't know me. Listen, I really think you're beautiful. There are thousands of guys who would give their right arm to be with you. You're the complete package looks, money, brains. But for now, I need to finish my education. I told you last time for coffee that my goal is to get out of poverty. Studying is the main step towards this goal. Everything that distracts me from this is not interesting to me now. I quickly responded, "So you're saying you're interested in me, but not right now?" If I heard correctly, I tried to maintain some of my dignity. He chuckled slightly, perhaps deciding to throw me a bone. I guess we can conclude this. Look, I wouldn't rule anything out in the future, but right now all I can see is my next exam. Actually, I have to go to him. Laura, thanks for the coffee. See you next semester. When he left, I realized that I had a lot to think about. He also unwittingly helped me choose my major. I decided to go into law. Instead of spending 4 years after college on medical school, I thought I could finish law school in 2 years if I really pushed myself. I needed to get out from under mommy and daddy as soon as possible. I have to grow up. Warren was never far from my thoughts throughout my sophomore and junior years, even though our paths never crossed. I took history, philosophy, and humanities, and Warren supposedly took math and computer science. At least I told myself that he wasn't avoiding me. Yes, I couldn't fully get over the fact that I couldn't shake his world with my presence. It still stuck in my throat. As I finished my 3rd year, I began to ask myself again why it bothered me so much that Warren had resisted my charms. He seemed like the first person or situation I had no control over. But there was something more. I was sure of this. With all my debate skills honed in class, as well as being on the debate team, I asked myself introspective questions one Saturday night while drinking wine in my now lonely apartment. Sheila was unable to cope with her course load and dropped out to complete a 2-year program at a local community college. We remained friends. I really could have used some of her worldly wisdom that evening. Do I feel more about Warren than I'm willing to admit? This can't be love, I thought. I've never felt anything more than infatuation or attraction for a Saturday night date in my life. I too was focused on my studies so that I could get on my own path straight out of law school as quickly as possible. I realized a few things that made me feel better. I was as attractive as Warren had hinted in our last conversation. I had no problem finding partners for any activities or even casual relationships if I needed to relieve stress. Did I know what love was? Probably not, I thought, but other than Warren, I had no standard for comparison. Heck, we had coffee twice. Both times, essentially, on my initiative, to be honest. This couldn't be love, I rationalized. The wine ran out, and I left this issue unresolved, preferring to go to bed. This lonely conversation over too much wine haunted me throughout my summer in New York. When I returned for my 4th year, I decided to focus on finishing my undergraduate degree, taking the LSAT, and getting into law school. As I mentioned at the beginning of this story, the last year has been almost a disaster. Bill was the reason Davenport. It hit me like a freight train when I started my 4th year. Not literally, but emotionally, he knocked me off my feet. His law course was transferred from Boise State University in Idaho. I could barely spell the word Boise, let alone know where it was on a map, but that didn't bother me much. By our 4th year in pre-law school, class sizes were relatively small. Plus, there were always some group projects that required 3 to 5 people to join together, depending on the class. It was in contract law class that I first met Bill. At first glance, he was not a handsome model, but he was quite attractive. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and cropped hair, but he had confidence. He was 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and long legs that looked good in shorts. He dressed a little preppy, with an alligator shirt and a blue or white shirt on top, which I found interesting considering his Midwestern background. In one of our contract law group projects, I learned that he wasn't meeting anyone because he had just moved to the area and didn't know anyone. We were talking about a project that was a small 3-piece, including one other guy named Steve Jenkins. Steve was the quintessential book nerd, able to quote virtually any judge's opinion on any constitutional topic. I thought he would be a good addition to our little team. Our assignment was given in the second lesson. We were given a contract and told that there were intentional errors in it, and it was our job as a team to find them all and then provide corrected language. Our final was an open debate in which we had to explain why we thought the language we had chosen was incorrect or erroneous, offer our opinions, and demonstrate the best correction. The contract was about 50 pages long and was based on a real estate transaction. I concluded that we would need to distribute the work evenly, carefully checking our section of the contract, as well as comparing it with the overall text, in order to complete the task. Having been in close proximity with Bill during our twice-weekly group meetings, I realized that he considered this task a little below his level. 2 weeks later, he had already drawn up an outline of his section of the contract, even suggesting language corrections. I was impressed after just reading the entire contract once. Steve also progressed further in those 2 weeks than I did. Bill offered to share his analysis with the group. I, being stubborn and selfish, insisted that it was too early. I needed one more week of my own analysis before we started showing each other our findings. I worked hard all week to get into my section. I thought I did great. The next week, I was ready to compare notes. I even offered to start first. When I finished, Bill had a look on his face that said, "Not bad, but you missed a few subtle points." He started showing me how if I just changed the initial condition in my section, reformulated it, then all the other numerous changes would not be necessary, since one change at the beginning actually changed the meaning of the rest of the contract. I felt stupid, to be honest. He offered to buy the group a drink when we finished, and Steve declined, saying he wanted to study some more. As usual, I found myself alone with the smartest guy in the class, so he could troll me. He did invite me for a drink, but he didn't rub my fault in my face. On the contrary, it was one of the most pleasant times spent in the company of a man. He seemed down to earth, as if he knew something the others didn't. Perhaps it was just his confidence showing. He truly believed that success after law school was just around the corner. He interested me during that conversation. We talked about goals, the future, even views on marriage and children, which seemed strange to me at a time when law school was on the horizon and no one had time for dating, let alone marriage and children. I dismissed the conversation as meaningless chatter. We completed our contracts course with our A. Most of the others in the class made the same mistake I made at first. They did not view the treaty from a broad perspective as Bill did. Bolstered by the fact that the rest of the class interpreted the contract the same way as I did, my self-esteem was boosted. Bill and I went our separate ways for Christmas break. I thought about Warren, of course, but not in the same light that I thought about Bill. I may have thought Bill was the real deal, solid, while Warren seemed like an enigma. He would be too obsessed with his personal pursuit of wealth to really be worth anything from a relationship perspective, even though I knew he was smart and hardworking, two very important principles for success. I was very pleasantly surprised when Bill called my parents' house the day after Christmas, asking, "Am I at home?" I didn't need a babysitter anymore, of course, but the butler answered the call, asking for the caller's name. He repeated the name Bill Davenport before handing me the phone with his white glove. A little taken aback, "Hey, Bill, how did you get this number?" This was long before cell phones became popular, and my parents' phone number was not listed. I was really curious. "Hi, Laura. You're right, he's not on the list as I found out. But after a little detective work, I found out that you share an apartment with a girl named Sheila. She gave me your number if I take her out to dinner." He sounded quite proud. I'm sure Sheila was more than happy to go to dinner with Bill. This little minx was probably all squirming and undressing, trying to get Bill into bed as soon as possible after dinner. Sensing my hesitation, Bill continued, "Let's just say I learned a few things about Sheila, and about you too." He stopped, leaving me alone with my thoughts about what this could mean. My anger started to flare, but then I immediately stopped and asked myself why. It's not like Bill and I have ever been on a date, let alone kissed. We parted on friendly terms before the Christmas holidays. Was I jealous of this little slut because she could lay my man down? Maybe. "Laura, look, I did ask Sheila to dinner. Let's say she wasn't on her best behavior, but I was. I got your number, that's all. Because I'm a gentleman, I'll never kiss and tell, but since even that didn't happen, there's nothing to tell." I was relieved without understanding why. "So why are you calling, Mr. Private Investigator?" I responded, trying to lighten the atmosphere between us, more for my own benefit than his. "Well, I was thinking that since my father is doing business this week in New York, and I'm here with him and my mother, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with us on Thursday night. I understand it's short notice. It's only Monday, but this trip was a surprise for him, and my mother decided to come along to watch the show. My antennae went up. If the trip was sudden, how did he have time to get my number after dinner with Sheila? Something is wrong here. Instead of asking 20 questions over the phone, I decided to accept his invitation to dinner and ask more questions later. Thursday flew by faster than I expected with dress shopping, hairstyling, manicure, new shoes, and jewelry. Bill offered to pick me up, but I refused, saying that our driver would take me. I think it offended him a little, but it didn't bother me at all. I wanted to make a good impression not only on Bill, but also on his parents. Hence all my preparations for personal hygiene and preparation for dinner. Bill chose, or perhaps his father chose, a restaurant at the Waldorf Astoria where I had already dined with my mother several times, so I knew the food would be very good. Perhaps we had more in common than I previously thought. This could be fun. I started looking forward to it. Bill met me at the door of the limousine, but before the driver could get around him and open the door, he helped me out. He was dressed in an elegant dark blue suit with patent leather shoes and a white handkerchief in the breast pocket of his jacket. He led me to the table, which I noticed was empty. Perhaps his parents went to freshen up, deciding to do it together, but I noticed that only 2 places were covered. I struggled to hold up the little black spaghetti strap dress with my blanket while balancing on my black 4-inch heels. I couldn't, of course, wear a bra with this dress, relying on my proud 36C to stand up straight this evening. I put on underwear and stockings because it was cold. Bill was very grateful and complimented me several times. I had not yet taken off my shawl covering, as I was still shivering from the cold after walking 10 feet from the limo to the front door. The temperature was about 20 degrees Fahrenheit at 7:30 in the evening when I arrived half an hour later than planned. After we sat down, we exchanged compliments and pleasantries. I asked where his parents were. He told me they got tickets to see the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. They expressed their regret that they would not be able to attend, but they rarely traveled to New York, and his mother was eager to see the show. Something about it sounded a little far-fetched. Too convenient, in my opinion. I asked a few follow-up questions to test his sincerity when he confessed. Okay, Laura, I actually did come here with my parents, but we went on a family vacation. We've been planning this for 6 months. This is my last year of school before law school, when things get really crazy, and my parents always wanted to come to New York. They really want to meet you, but I specifically chose this evening, knowing that my mother already got tickets to the show. I wanted to have dinner with you, but I was afraid of what if. I won't invite my parents, you won't agree. That's all. A sincere statement of his intentions. Finally, I thought he had succumbed to my charms, like all the other boys and men in my life. But then, when I think about it, I gave in to him. This was probably my last defense, which he broke when he admitted that he was pursuing me. I felt so sexy and loved at that moment that he went to all these lengths to arrange a date with me. Dinner was great, now that the truth is out. We were both equal. I really liked Bill from the beginning. Not enough to completely forget Warren, but it was a strong start. We exchanged childhood stories until the waiter came over for the 10th time, indicating that they wanted to close the restaurant. Around the same time, my driver came into the lobby. I only saw the top of his cap coming through the door. I looked around and realized that the restaurant was empty. We parted, holding hands with a brief kiss that left me wanting more as he helped me into the limo. This was a turning point in our relationship. From dinner the next night with his parents to mutual support throughout law school, which took 3 years instead of my planned 2, to the bar exam. We both passed it on the first try. It was almost unheard of, but I expected it from Bill. I doubted myself a little, but I was proud of our common achievements. We seemed like a good couple. At least it seemed balanced to me. We decided not to commit to marriage while we were in law school, preferring to live together. It was no surprise that we were both accepted into UCLA School of Law. Bill was accepted based on his academic record and LSAT scores. I was accepted mainly because of my parents' large donation to UCLA because my LSAT scores weren't good enough. Graduating with a 3.5 GPA didn't hurt my chances and went a long way toward softening opinions during the admissions process, so I could say I partially earned my place in law school. Bill and I flew home from a whirlwind of law school graduation parties for an August wedding in New York City with all the trappings of high society. My mother had a wonderful time during her last semester of law school planning, organizing, and of course, negotiating wedding details with some of her high-ranking socialites. I didn't care much about that. Bill and I have been together for over 3 years. The wedding was almost an anticlimax from my point of view. We enjoyed a perfect honeymoon in Greece, at my parents' expense, of course. I really loved Bill and felt that he loved and respected me. Our social life was virtually non-existent during law school, preferring to find solace in each other's arms, making passionate love whenever we could given our course load. Our tiny two-bedroom apartment seemed like a fitting start to our partnership. Our bedroom served as a place for us to sleep and recuperate, and the second room was equipped with 2 tables and chairs, positioned so that we sat with our backs to each other for obvious reasons. It would be too easy for any of us to look up from our textbooks, see the other, and immediately fall into a sexual whirlwind. Married life brought us to Chicago. Bill got an internship at a fairly prestigious firm in the mergers and acquisitions department, while I took a slightly less prestigious job at a small local firm specializing, oddly enough, in real estate. I think this pre-law contract law course and subsequent group project with Bill is finally starting to pay off. It was a nice thought, actually. Think about how we met. I loved Bill for all of his intelligence, calm demeanor, and unwavering support he gave me throughout the latter half of my 4th year and through law school. He was a passionate lover, always caring about my pleasure before his own. It seemed like we were perfect for each other. Other than getting married and paying for law school, my parents chose to keep money out of our relationship, which I think has helped us tremendously. Bill had a small amount of money to fund law school, but when it dried up, he took a job in a small law office for minimum wage during his last semester of law school. It really broke my heart to see him go to work, knowing that I could more than easily provide for both of us. I think men have pride, and because of his pride, he felt it necessary to work to put food on the table. I accepted this, but never made it clear that I had more money than God had at hand. I still don't know if Bill ever knew how much money my parents were worth. I never told him, and he never asked. My father insisted on a prenuptial agreement, which we both studied as carefully as that first real estate agreement. We both didn't see anything special in him. It became a minor event. We were able to buy a small apartment on the Gold Coast, overlooking Lake Michigan, close to the many shops on Dearborn Street that had recently come to life. I was in shopping heaven. It was a good place to call home. It had its own porter, private parking, and lake views. What more could a couple moving up the social ladder ask for, with nightlife just a short taxi ride away? The next 5 years were more difficult than I could have ever imagined. We were both approaching 30, each working 60 to 70 hours a week to try to beat the next colleague in our junior positions at law firms. Bill was then offered his first big job as the first lawyer in a significant acquisition. The client was not important. The terms of the deal are even smaller. The only thing that mattered was that he was virtually unavailable to me emotionally, physically, and even mentally when he was at home. I didn't seem destined for a stellar career, working on boring home contracts rather than the big real estate deals I had hoped for when joining the firm. Bill seemed to be thriving at his firm. To be honest, I have enjoyed his success over the years, but I needed something more. I guess I was still the spoiled little princess my parents raised me to be. The spoiled princess made herself known from time to time, but Bill didn't have the patience or, frankly, the time to deal with her. He was dismissive at times, which I found very annoying. I hinted at having children because I wanted them. Bill seemed unfazed and even told me that he thought children might not be in our best interest right now since his career was just starting to take off and he didn't want to be burdened with children. This might have been the first betrayal since we first discussed marriage and children over 8 years ago. It certainly wasn't the last, I discovered. I believe that in any relationship, the partner must learn to give and take. However, I was more of a taker than a giver, and given my remorse for being spoiled, I began to think, what if? Bill, I grew up with modest means my entire life, and somehow my parents sent me to Boys State. This made an impression on me. I had an older sister who decided to pursue a nursing degree after graduating but ended up pregnant instead, much to the chagrin of my parents. The guy acted at least decently by proposing to marry her. My sister Yana rejected his offer. It shocked me, but it almost devastated my parents. We grew up Catholic in the relatively large, but very small town of Boise, Idaho. I, the younger brother, took it in stride, never missing a second of studying, instead choosing to stay on the sidelines and let the drama unfold. And so it was, and I moved on without getting too much collateral damage. My sister had to deal with neglect and anger from my parents, but in the end they, as I believe all parents do, came to love and cherish their new grandson, even taking Jonna back into their fold. My older sister was like a beacon for me. She stood in front, seemingly taking hurtful comments from my parents, but was still standing proud when the dust settled. I began to respect her decisions and often turned to her for advice on all matters. Since she was born first, I guess she inherited some of the rough edges from my parents. According to my mother, by the time I came along, raising children was not that difficult. Perhaps she was just tired, or Yana really did damage to my parents. One day, I asked Yana if she had to do it again, if she regretted getting pregnant. She quickly responded that it was the best time of her life before, during and after. I was confused and asked her to clarify. She said, I felt wanted, appreciated, loved, and sexy while doing it and happy with the outcome. Why should I be sorry? I think this is a summary of Yana's life philosophy. It made sense to me. I tried a similar approach. I had a pretty normal high school and went to college, if that's possible. I had random girls and a lot of guy friends, but nothing serious until Tracy Shield. She was shy, unassuming, and mostly preferred to be the quiet one in her high school classes. That was until I appeared on stage and she agreed to dance with me. I was the eldest, she was the youngest. There were high school students there, where both juniors and seniors could attend the bachelor party or come on dates. I didn't have a partner for this dance. I noticed Tracy sitting alone while slow dancing. I asked her to dance. Her eyes lit up like the Eiffel Tower at night. I guess at the time, when the elder asked her to dance, it was the equivalent of all her friends punching her a ticket to prove that she had street cred in the gang. Although I didn't see the squad hanging out with her checking her ticket. The feeling of her in my arms while slow dancing was something that I cannot describe or repeat even in my student years. I kissed her on the cheek when the song ended. There was a surprised but wistful look in her eyes, as if she would prefer that I kiss her on the lips. I was at least keen, if not more so. I've never been in love, so I had nothing to compare it to. All summer, we were a couple, often going to the movies or burger joints. We laughed all summer until about 2 weeks before school started. I felt like I could be myself around Tracy. There was no pretentiousness about her. She called things a shovel. She was about 5'4" in tall, dark red hair, dark green grayish eyes, but firm in all her feminine charm. While she was playing volleyball, it was clear that because of her size, she would never stand out. It seemed less important than just enjoying the game and having fun with the game. She poured her heart and soul into almost everything she did, from school to sports. We never made love, though. It definitely wasn't for lack of trying. She seemed to be protecting something other than her innocence. I left for state college in the fall. She knew this as well as I did, so I suspect she didn't put as much of herself into the relationship as I did. She was probably protecting herself from the inevitable. It was fun to spend the summer with her. I had big dreams. I left her a promise that I believed I would keep, one of the few I had ever made to anyone, that I would return to her in the future. She graciously accepted it for what it was at that moment, the end of a summer romance. It was my failed attempt to learn from her disappointment by making a promise. She didn't cry. I guess it was exactly as we both expected it to be bittersweet. Maybe I have this feeling. Tracy restrained herself from falling completely in love. I was almost sure that it was so. We parted as friends, with no hope of rekindling the fun and romance we had at the time. Tracy remained in my thoughts from time to time throughout my freshman year. I didn't focus on her. I was busy with school. She was finishing her last year of high school, participating in all the related activities. Sometimes, after one too many beers, I would ponder the what-ifs. After our summer walk, we went our separate ways. I knew that Boys State was underwhelming to potential law school students. That summer, after my freshman year, I began looking for schools that had a satellite law school. I assumed that if I graduated from their school with a bachelor's degree, it would check off their law school admissions program and make admission easier. UCLA had both a pre-law program and a law school. I saw this as my ticket to law school, provided I could maintain my grades and still score decently on the LSAT. I set my sights on UCLA. I have not yet decided when I will take the leap, as I have not yet shared my plans with my parents. I had no idea if they had money for advanced education, such as law school. I just finished my freshman year, but haven't declared my major yet. Over the summer, I tried to contact Tracy. Her mother said she volunteered with the Peace Corps during the summer before going to college in the fall. She planned to attend community college in a year and then apply to Boys State. At the end of our conversation, her mother told me what she really thought about me. "Do you know you broke her heart when you left?" But I never finished my explanation. "Don't worry, I know you didn't turn her on. You were at least old enough not to drag her along just to have sex, or so she says. She put on a brave face after you left, but I could tell she was in a lot of pain. In a way, I'm glad she didn't come here for the summer, and I'll have to go through that heartache again. I'll tell her you called the next time I talk to her, but that's it. I plan to say, 'Good luck in college, Bill.'" She hung up. Of course, I realized where I stand in this family. If her mother felt the need to put me in my place, what does that say about Tracy, or especially her father? He probably would have shot me upon meeting me. Tracy's mother was probably right in some ways. It wouldn't be fair to Tracy to return home, repair the relationship, only to leave again. How to remove scab from a wound that has started to heal and is causing bleeding. It is better to leave it bandaged so that it heals completely. My father sold life insurance. My mother's job was in the house. Home, my sister and I, and my father were her career. When I went off to college, she went to work in retail. She succeeded. She worked in a small bric-a-brac shop that sold anything nautical. How this store made money in a landlocked state was beyond me. She was happy. She and my father started having date nights on Fridays. He picked her up from the store where she worked, and they went to dinner together. Both looked very happy when I watched them in the summer. In the fall, I returned for my second year. I decided to make an announcement at Christmas and inform my parents of my plan to transfer at some point in the future. My conversation with my parents was just a formality. They saw my grades and knew that I had a good head on my shoulders. I prepared my notes to argue my case on all the details of my decision, but from the very beginning of the conversation they simply smiled and told me that the decision was mine. They trusted that I had done my homework, and yes, they had money for law school. What a relief. It was the best Christmas present I could have received. My grades by that time were excellent. I narrowly missed out on getting a 4.0 with a B+ average, costing me a perfect GPA. Over the Christmas holidays, I prepared my research to talk to parents about transferring. I was going to try this between my second and third years. As it turned out, I couldn't be accepted into UCLA until my fourth year. I still had enough credits to finish on time. With my high GPA, getting in wasn't much of a problem, except that there were no spots available to transfer into the third-year pre-law program, so I had to wait until next year. The third course flew by like lightning. I was packing for the summer when Tracy suddenly came into my thoughts. I didn't think about her throughout my third year. Why did it come to my mind now? Perhaps it was finishing my studies at UCLA, pursuing my dream of becoming a lawyer, which highlighted the fact that I would probably never return home. That's life, I guess. One door opens, another closes. Last summer at home, I worked for my father's insurance company, mostly doing clerical work to earn some money for my upcoming fourth year at UCLA. I actually helped my father and his business in the office. He even held a farewell lunch with the office staff, which was very unusual for him. He also understood that I would probably never return. Right before I left for California, my father announced plans to go on vacation to New York with my mother, and I was invited, of course. I didn't think about it at the time, but this could be our last family vacation together. Yana was invited, but she said that she could not go. She had her last semester of nursing school left and was looking forward to caring for her son and relaxing for the Christmas holiday. I was happy for her in some ways to be so close to graduating as a nurse, but at the same time sad in others. I missed spending time with my childhood hero, hoping she would change her mind and we could all celebrate together. I didn't expect to fall in love almost immediately upon returning to school in the fall. I didn't know anyone, of course, but classes started the week before Labor Day. I managed to find affordable off-campus housing that I shared with two other guys I had never met before. They seemed good enough. I didn't plan to spend much time in the apartment, just shower and sleep. I studied hard to prepare for the LSAT to ensure acceptance into law school, so I spent most of my time in the library or in class. My only guilty pleasure was watching Dallas and Dynasty on Thursday nights with a few beers. I always freed up my time to spend those 2 hours each week catching up with the Ewing's antics, so it was quite a shock when I walked into my contract law class and saw the younger version of Linda Gray before she became an actress sitting in the classroom. I literally looked twice. I was so confused that I almost asked for her autograph before I remembered where I was. I watched her from afar for a week before we were paired up to work in a group of 3 with another student named Steve Jenkins. Steve was quite inconspicuous and shy. He truly knew constitutional law better than anyone I have ever met. I was hoping to use his knowledge to improve my LSAT preparation. However, all my attention was focused on the third person in our small work group. Laura Greenstein won my heart immediately. Perhaps it was her striking resemblance to the Dallas actress or her sex appeal when she walked into the room, but I was clearly in love and practically on my way to love at first sight. Luckily for me, contract law was a topic I was quite knowledgeable about, having spent the summer studying insurance claims, judgments, settlements, and policies. We received our assignments next week. I quickly noticed an error at the beginning of my contract section in the definition section, which when reading the rest of the contract made everything almost too simple. If I changed the definition in the declaration section of this 50-page real estate agreement, everything else became logical with only a few relatively minor changes throughout the text. I couldn't believe it was so simple, so I spent the rest of the week going through it line by line. I couldn't find any other major bugs. I felt pretty confident going into class the following week to let the group know that I was probably done. This really excited Laura that both Steve and I were ahead of her on the task. She requested another week before we compared notes. I quickly agreed, mainly because I began to doubt myself that it could be that simple. We compared notes the following week and Laura practically insisted on going first. I guess she thought she had found every little detail and nuance that needed fixing. I was starting to feel stupid, like I had really missed the boat listening to her review of the contract. But when I shared my analysis, a light bulb went on for Steve, who looked at his notes and at Laura sitting across from him with a confused expression. She was so sweet that I almost couldn't stand to ruin her enthusiasm if I was right. She was so charming, full of glowing enthusiasm for her approach to the treaty. I tried not to be arrogant in my analysis. I decided to stick with my hypothesis, which, if true, makes the entire contract logical according to the parties' intentions, as we were taught in class. After Steve and Laura considered my points, Steve immediately agreed. Laura reluctantly agreed. She was dismissive in her tone. I invited the group over for drinks. Luckily, Steve declined, which left me with Laura, just as I had hoped from the beginning. I don't know what she was thinking while we were drinking, but I knew for sure that I was in love when we finished. We finished the course with an A, with a smirk from the professor that said, "Finally, someone gets it." Our little working group felt pretty good about our efforts, even if Laura was still suffering from not catching the easy edit. Laura and I didn't really date or get into a relationship until the end of the semester, even though I wanted to. I knew she would be going home for the holidays, so I decided to do a little research. We had each other's phone numbers in our university apartments, but I had no way of contacting her at her number in New York. A quick scan of the white pages yielded no results. A plan was starting to form in my head based on a trip my dad had announced for the week after Christmas, but I needed to contact Laura to make it work. I guess you could call it luck or coincidence, but I saw Laura having coffee with someone one day after class in the student union. I skipped class to stick around and wait for them to leave, hoping to catch her friend. The man she was talking to seemed like a good friend. She was animated in her conversation with Laura. I was hoping she had Laura's number in New York. When they finished drinking coffee, I followed Laura's friend at a distance until she walked to her car. I called out to her, not knowing her name. "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a minute?" She turned around, a little scared, probably clutching her purse tightly to her, with her car keys in her hand and what looked like a can of pepper spray hanging from her shoulder. Her keys. She probably considered me a threat. I could not blame her, I guess. "Hi, I'm Bill Davenport. I just want to ask you a question." As soon as I said my name, she relaxed. I was still about 10 feet away from her. This seemed a little strange to me. "Hi, I'm Sheila. So you're Bill, right?" She didn't do you justice, you know. It took me a couple of seconds to understand. "Laura talked about me," I answered in a stuttering voice. "Honey, you were her only topic of conversation, and by the look on your face, you're just as bad at it as she is. So what did you want to ask me?" I've recovered enough to ask her, "Do you have Laura's number in New York?" Eat. She stopped suddenly, obviously not intending to make my task any easier. "Will you give it to me?" "Think." Her lips lifted slightly, but she made no attempt to take the address book out of her purse. It dawned on me that she was going to make me beg her. I decided to turn on lawyer mode and start negotiations. "And under what conditions would you possibly give me her number?" "Not sure, actually." Her eyes looked up as if she was thinking. "Not sure? What does that mean? You should know what it would take to convince you to give me her number." "Oh, I'm sure I know what it will take, just not sure which restaurant I want to go to first." Her raised lips turned into a wide smile, showing off her perfect white teeth. She had me, and she knew it. I started to get nervous at this point. I'm sure she saw me blush, even from this distance, which had not changed since I called her out. It sounded like this sweetheart Southern girl was going to set terms and conditions for the date. "I'm not local, and I don't know many restaurants. But if you choose one, I'll take you there, at my expense." "Oh, honey, I know it's going to be a treat, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dinner first, then we'll see your treat. Do you have a pen and paper?" I think I blushed even more. She gave me her address and told me to pick it up at 7 in the evening. By this time, she will decide which restaurant to go to. What have I taken upon myself, I thought. Although she was nice, I was interested in Laura. I wasn't going to do anything with Sheila that would get back to Laura. Exactly at 7 in the evening, I knocked on her door. She must have been waiting for me because the door opened as soon as I finished knocking. I was wearing a blue button-down shirt, gray pants, and chose to wear a blue jacket, not knowing what restaurant we would go to for dinner. She was wearing a black skirt that reached a few inches above her knees and a bright red blouse. She was wearing knee-high black boots with high heels, so she was only a couple of inches shorter than me. She licked her lips, inviting him to kiss, showing very seductive red lips. If Sheila tried to seduce me, she did it perfectly. I couldn't help but notice her. She put on makeup that made her face even cuter than it was without it. Her blonde hair was tied in a ponytail earlier. Now she combed them and curled them so that they hung down to her shoulders. Overall, she was very attractive. She directed me to which restaurant to go to while I was driving. As soon as we parked, I walked over to help her out of the car. I couldn't be sure, but it seemed like she deliberately flashed her red panties at me as she got out of the car. Now my face was the same color as her blouse. She smiled widely, which let me know that she knew I would be watching, and she was happy to oblige. I mentally hit myself to remember the reason I was here. The restaurant looked like a family Italian restaurant with red checkered tablecloths and waiters in tuxedo shirts. She must have made a reservation because the hostess immediately showed us to a small, secluded table in the back. When we sat down and ordered our drinks, she handed me a folded piece of paper. "No matter what happens, here's Sheila's number." I relaxed. "Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate it," I said sincerely. "I hope you understand that I was just joking earlier. Although you are very cute, I might change my mind after dinner." She gave me her best smile with raised eyebrows, hoping maybe. I answered her in kind, "Thanks for the compliment, but seriously, you probably won't be able to handle me," I said with a serious face so that she would not understand that I was joking. "Honey, somehow I don't doubt it, but do you really want to find out? Because I'm sure I'd die trying." How quickly everything turned in her favor again. "You know what? Let's negotiate a truce and enjoy dinner." Agreed. "Got it, right? Okay, I'll accept your peace offer. The food here is really delicious." We settled into pleasant conversation over dinner, finishing with coffee before I drove Sheila back to her apartment. I extended my hand for a handshake, but Sheila took my hand in hers, pulling me in for a heated kiss, which I barely dodged by turning my head so she kissed my cheek instead. "You're really in love, right? Because I know it's not because of me." "Sheila, I had a good time tonight. You're funny and very attractive. In other circumstances, well, who knows?" I just left the thought unfinished. The hint was clear. I believed her attractive and definitely interesting, but the only reason I was with her was to get Laura's number. She winked at me as I left. She scared me a little. So much charisma in a package like that would make someone very happy. As soon as my final exam was over, I packed up and headed to Idaho. I called Laura in New York the day after Christmas, suggesting we go out to dinner. I told her that my parents were also here and they would join us. She agreed, but preferred that the driver drove me. I was hoping to tell her the truth, that although my parents were indeed in New York, they were going to a play and it would be just the two of us at dinner. Everything went well because by the time she arrived, she saw a table for two. I told her honestly about my experience with Sheila and that my parents were on a vacation that they had been planning for a long time. She seemed to take it well and didn't blame me too much for my deception. We had a great dinner and discussed everything from religion to politics, hearkening back to law school. Our thoughts coincided on almost every issue discussed. At least for me. We ended up closing the restaurant. We parted with a passionate kiss and a promise to have dinner the next night with my parents. Once we returned to classes, we were almost inseparable. I spent more time in her apartment than she was in mine, since I had roommates. I was pretty sure after dinner in New York that I wanted to marry her. We talked about this when we were finishing up our last semester of undergraduate studies, graduating with honors. Neither of us went home during the summer between undergrad and law school. I moved into her apartment, and we shared everything willingly. We decided to postpone our wedding until after law school. We were exclusive throughout law school, helping each other with a huge amount of course material. After 3 years of seemingly endless studying just to stay afloat, we finally got married. Her mother planned almost everything as Laura and I were busy studying for the bar exam. But the 2 weeks in Greece for our honeymoon were perfect. I really thought we had everything we could want. Two people completely in love, brilliant careers in front of us, job offers in hand, and a future to enjoy each other and have children at some point. Looking back, the turning point in our relationship came when I was appointed lead counsel on a takeover case, 5 years into our careers and marriage. It was a monumental takeover that required an incredible amount of research and hundreds of hours of work. I literally lived in this business for 6 months. I left Laura alone for most of this time. We both didn't have many friends in Chicago, having lived elsewhere our entire lives. She seemed to take comfort in shopping, or retail therapy, as she called it. I poured my heart, mind, and soul into the success of this acquisition for our client. Partners in my company noticed. After the deal was completed, they gave me a $100,000 bonus for my efforts. Whatever I gained financially, I lost in my intimacy with Laura. When things calmed down, she was happy and proud of my accomplishments, but things weren't the same. Our love relationship was not that passionate. Dinner wasn't as good as it was in her small apartment during law school when we ate hot dogs and chili. Laura, who grew up in wealth, was always a privileged girl who became a woman. I never had any doubts about her love for me. I just thought the charm had worn off and vowed to try to regain the intimacy we had lost. I suspect, although Laura never told me, that she resented me for all the time I invested in this takeover. I tried to cut back on my work hours so I could spend more time with Laura and our relationship. She seemed grateful, but like I said, the shine was hard to get back. I did my best. I really tried. I knew I had neglected her, but I thought she was mature enough to understand that life doesn't follow a straight line to the finish line. I knew she had compromised by taking a real estate job with a local firm. I knew it was more to her than money. She always had money and more growing up in the family. I could never compete with that. I guess in my stupid way I made it about money. I tried to show Laura and the world that I could do it. It never meant anything to her. She probably believed that money was what drove me to put in the hours I put into closing the acquisition. This is really not true. First of all, I didn't know that my company would pay me a bonus. For me, it was about success. Prove yourself successful along your path. I needed to feel useful and needed in this world. Not very noble, looking back. Of course, she could see that my feelings for her had nothing to do with money. We signed a prenuptial agreement that virtually guaranteed that I would not be able to take advantage of her wealth. I just proved to the world that I don't need Laura's money. Surely she could see that I was self-sufficient. Maybe if I had told Laura that I needed to prove my worth as a lawyer, she would have understood what the takeover meant to me. Maybe she would agree. She was beautiful, but not as supportive as I would have liked at some points. She was a strong, spoiled little rich girl who always got her way. I thought she understood that sometimes there are more important things in life than herself. Despite all this, I loved her. The next case I took was the biggest one since I joined the firm. This was not a routine closing on a house, but a significant commercial settlement. This included rezoning a piece of property for the construction of an office building. The company that hired us was a computer startup looking to expand in the Chicago market. I was focused on rezoning because what the client wanted was nearly impossible. The client wanted to rezone a Lake Michigan property to construct a new office building. Zone changes occurred frequently. Our firm has participated in many hearings on this issue on behalf of our clients. But rezoning the site from residential to commercial, on or near a lake, was a challenge. I studied the records and knew all the zoning laws. I have reviewed all cases where zoning was changed for a specific purpose. The prospects did not look promising for the client. I went to the senior partners of the firm and told them that I did not think that the client's desire was feasible. Their answer was direct. Do it. This is what a partner would do. The thought that they were giving me a chance at partnership if I closed this deal was more than motivating. Maybe Bill's success and subsequent bonus fueled my desires, but nevertheless, I spent an incredible amount of hours and mental energy trying to find a way to change the client's zone to commercial. My efforts were useless. I was upset and called my dad. He will take care of his princess. And he did. The rezoning hearing passed without the slightest notice from the commission as soon as the chairman announced that the zoning had been changed, much to my surprise. I think I always knew that my father had money and influence. Now it really showed up. I shrugged. The formal closing of the deal took place on the following Friday. I expected the client's lawyer to come, since it was with her that I had dealt with everything up to that moment. Warren Blaylock came in with a beautiful brunette whom I assumed was his lawyer. I was so shocked that I excused myself and went to the ladies' room to collect my thoughts. My assistant followed me into the toilet. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" "Marcia, this guy went to college with me." She didn't need to ask any more questions. She knew my background probably better than most, which I didn't tell anyone at the firm. I sat in the booth, collecting my thoughts. The rezoning hearing has been completed. The hard part is over, thanks to Dad. All I had to do was close the deal. I had to do it for the sake of the company, for myself, and for the sake of the client, who turned out to be Warren Blaylock. I pulled myself together after splashing cold water on my face. I needed to reapply my makeup, but it was a small price to pay for calming my nerves. Marcia stayed with me while I prepared, asking questions. "So this is the guy you were talking about. In college, huh?" I didn't answer right away, continuing to apply my makeup, so she took that as permission to continue. "He's attractive, but aren't you married?" "Yes." "So what's the problem?" "He's not just a client. He's the only man who never wanted me." I fell silent. "Oh, you mean he's the one who missed the chance?" Marcia was moderately intelligent, but what she lacked in intelligence she made up for in breast size. All the men in the office dropped pencils in her direction, hoping she would bend over and show off her incredible cleavage. Not exactly the one who missed out. Maybe the one I couldn't have. Or maybe the one who didn't want me. "Honey, you have Bill. And if you ever get tired of him, remember who your friends are, okay? Now you need to finish your makeup so we can close this deal. Think you can pull yourself together to finish this?" "Yes, I think I can." I didn't feel so confident, but I didn't want her to see my hesitation. We returned to the conference room. I introduced myself to Bill's lawyer, Laura Davenport, emphasizing Davenport, knowing that Warren would recognize my maiden name as Greenstein, assuming I was married. She clearly didn't know that I already knew Warren. Warren didn't tell her this while I was nervous in the restroom because she introduced me to Warren Blaylock as if I had no idea who he was. Warren didn't have a wedding ring, but that didn't mean anything. Apparently, at least for now, he had decided not to tell his lawyer that he knew me, which was fine with me. "I hope all the documents are in order and we can sign on the bottom line," his lawyer Cynthia asked him after completing the water procedures. Yes, everything is fine," I answered evenly, trying to return to the state of a lawyer. With nods around the table, the signing and transfer of documents from left to right began. Marcia was a notary, so as soon as each document was signed, she dutifully notarized it. Within 15 minutes, all documents were signed. I stood up to thank everyone when Warren interrupted me. "Laura, Cynthia will take our copies to the office for registration, but can you give me 15 minutes for a cup of coffee? I think I saw a cafe right next to your building. I would like to remember the old ones." "Time." Cynthia glanced at Warren and then at me. I looked like I had just been asked to stand in front of a firing squad. Marcia gave me glances indicating that I should not accept Warren's invitation. Or maybe she was hoping I would accept to gain leverage over Bill or both. I was too confused to think at that moment. "I have a meeting across town, but I think I can spare a few minutes for a cup of coffee. Let me grab my briefcase and purse. Meet me in the lobby," I answered. It's funny, looking back 10 years later, Warren said something similar to me the last time we had coffee. We met in the lobby a few minutes later. "You know, Laura, to be honest, you're even more beautiful now than you were in college. But I think you already know that. And I think, judging by the diamond on your finger, your husband tells you that all the time." I smiled internally at his comment about my appearance, but decided to ignore it. Instead, I thought, "See, this is what you could have if you weren't so busy finishing school and making money." Retelling it in my head, it sounded empty. There was nothing wrong with Warren having goals and going after what he really wanted. I guess I still couldn't come to terms with the fact that he didn't want me. "The cafe is right around the corner. We need to go so I can make it to my meeting." I started to walk, but Warren gently grabbed my elbow, forcing me to turn around. Laura, it's really nice to see you, he said, looking into my eyes with genuine emotion that I felt right down to my toes. Nice to see you too, Warren. I didn't know you'd be here. All I had was the company name and your lawyer's name, so I was just as surprised as you were when you walked into my office. But we really have to go if we want to drink this coffee. I smiled at him for a moment. We walked in silence to the cafe. I took a table while Warren ordered coffee for us. He even remembered how much I like coffee with 2 spoons of sugar. This surprised me. Of all the everyday facts to remember about someone, to remember a preference for coffee 10 years later seemed unusual. He wasted no time in starting the conversation with a slightly shocking statement. I have a little confession. This amazed me. I actually knew you would be the attorney representing the property and the closing. How? How could you know that? I was stunned by his confession. How? It's elementary, my dear Watson. He was imitating Sherlock Holmes again, just as he had done the last time we had coffee. I asked you to be a lawyer, and from what I understand, you'll probably be offered a partnership thanks to the rezoning and closing of the deal. You're welcome. Warren, what kind of game are you playing? Are you saying that one of the senior partners is your friend, that you called and asked for a favor? It's not very lawyerly of me to accuse our client of violating ethical principles, but I was confused. A smart businessman always knows the players in the game. I have made it a point to always know who I am dealing with. Your business partner, Darrell Strong, helped me form my first corporation many years ago, before he joined your firm. I knew him, and when my business was expanding here in Chicago, I called him for a recommendation, as simple as that. That doesn't explain why I was assigned to your case. No, you're right. I asked Darrell to nominate you. He answered confidently. How did you even know that I work at the company? Right then, a light bulb started to go on in my confused brain. He must have been monitoring my progress, or at least checking in on my whereabouts periodically since college. At first, this thought scared me, thinking that he was following me. I then blushed slightly at the implication that he had actually been interested in me all along. My blush developed into warmth throughout my body. I felt wanted again, the way Bill made me feel the first Christmas before we were married. Warren raised his eyebrows in a questioning gesture. Got it? I have my own version, but I'm interested in hearing yours, I replied, returning to the manner of a lawyer. Oh, the lawyer's back. Okay, as you probably guessed, I've been keeping an eye on you since college. Not that I hired a private investigator or anything, but I kept you in the loop. Remember Sheila, your roommate? Using Sheila again, just like Bill did. She and I remained at least casual friends over the years. We talked several times a year, just discussing our lives. I think Warren found a way too, enough to know where I am. I wonder if they discussed Sheila and me during pillow talk. So what do you want, Warren? My tone seemed controversial, even to me. I'd like to have dinner with you. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not sure my husband would like it. I didn't say you couldn't take him with you, did I? Warren, didn't we say everything we wanted to say that day in the student union? I mean, after accusing you of being a man-lover, I'm surprised you're even talking to me anymore, let alone about turning to me as your lawyer for this real estate transaction. I never said I didn't want to be friends back then. If I remember correctly, you were overconfident, so the issue was never brought up. What's the point? The point then and now is that I just want to be friends with you, your husband, and your other friends. I just moved to the city. I don't know anyone except my business partners. It would be fun to hang out with people who know the area and get to know Chicago better. Is there anything wrong with that? Warren was starting to sound annoyed. I'll ask my husband and let you know. How do you like it? Still holding a grudge because I rejected you all those years ago, huh? What? No, of course not. I think so. I can see it in your body language, which doesn't quite match the words you say. And what exactly is my body language telling you that doesn't match my words? First of all, even though you're married, you act like you're available. Your posture is a little straighter, and your eyes show your emotions with every word you say. Even though you claim that your husband wouldn't like it if we let's have dinner, I don't think you really mean it. I think it's just a smokescreen. Well, I think your crystal ball has a few cracks. You should take it to the dealer to have it checked. I'm very happily married, thank you. I didn't say it entirely with disdain, but close. I also didn't say it convincingly enough, even to myself. And of course, it was at least a little lie. I wasn't completely happy with Bill. He tried to fix this by spending more time with me after his big acquisition, but it looks like it will be a long road back to where we were, at least for me. Okay, my offer still stands for you and your husband. Now, I don't want you to be late for your next appointment, so you should probably get out to make it on time. Bye, Laura. And just like that, he got up and left. I still sat there, feeling like a child who had been scolded for something I wasn't even sure about. He sent me away abruptly, and I was left sitting there like a fool. I thought about this meeting for maybe a minute before checking my watch. I really needed to move on to my next appointment. The next 2 weeks passed without much drama in my life. However, Warren was never far from my thoughts. I'm sure Bill noticed my melancholy moments. He went out of his way to lure me into dinners and surprise lunches. I always agreed because deep down I really loved Bill, or maybe I loved him for his confidence and support, and the fact that he helped us both get through law school without scratching each other's eyes or going crazy in the process. I was confused about my emotions. The firm offered me a full partnership, which I gratefully accepted. The announcement party was attended by all the employees, their spouses or significant others, and Warren Blaylock, much to my surprise. Otherwise, a very happy moment in my life almost turned into a personal disaster. I constantly tried to keep Bill away from Warren so that neither of us would have to face this awkward moment. I watched as Warren looked at Bill. I watched as Warren looked at me. I watched as Marcia watched the whole thing with almost schoolboy enthusiasm, hoping that she would get a chance at Bill if our cart went off the rails. I was determined not to let this happen. I felt drawn to Warren again after all these years. It was almost hypnotic, controlling me. I mentally hit myself to snap out of my what-if thinking. Fortunately, the evening ended without incident. That night, I returned home and desperately threw myself into Bill's arms, almost begging him to love me, take me and make me yours. He did it without question. Later, he asked me, "Not that I'm complaining, but what came over you tonight, darling? You seemed possessed." "I love you, Bill. I'm yours. That's all. I'm just so happy. And maybe the champagne helped a little, but not much. Do you mind?" "Hell no, Laura. It was like old times with us. I'm so proud of you and your partnership. I think this is the start of something really great for you. I'm happy for us. I love you, Laura." When Bill finished, I was already starting to fall asleep with my head on his chest. Soon Bill began to breathe rhythmically, indicating that he was falling asleep. We both went to dreamland together. I almost lost my temper after my first lunch with Warren about 3 months into my partnership. Up to this point, I had successfully feigned work pressure as an excuse for not going out to lunch with him. I knew even then that my emotions towards Warren were like a fragile porcelain doll standing on the edge of a damaged shelf. If he started shaking the floor, I would fall helplessly into his arms. I completely immersed myself in the partnership, taking on every difficult case that arose. I just couldn't admit to myself that Warren was affecting me or could affect my marriage. I was confident in my position, if not my abilities, and often demonstrated them, providing partners with further evidence that I was partnership material. In a weak moment, with nothing urgent on my schedule on a Friday afternoon, I relented and agreed to have lunch with Warren. This became my undoing. Sitting opposite him, I looked into his eyes and saw the desire burning in him. This was not related to college classes, exams, or earning the first million. It was aimed only at me. He may have rejected me years ago, but a casual observer would never know it if he looked into his eyes today from our secluded table at the back of the restaurant. It fired me up on a cold February day. Warren was his pleasant, self-confident, but at times self-ironic self. So much so that I had a hard time following his talk about computers and their impact on society. I probably seemed lost in my own thoughts throughout the conversation, but Warren just smiled. Then he did what I thought was predestined, but I never admitted to myself that I wanted it. Laura, I know that you are afraid. I see it in your eyes. Remember, eyes do not betray. They tell me everything I need to know. I'm not sure where you're going with this. I know. And you too. I want you. I need you to be there. I want you to be mine, and I want to be yours. I know you're married, which makes it a little more difficult. But for me, it's not matter a lot. I see your soul through your eyes. You want me too. Oh, God help me, I really wanted Warren. Damn it, I wanted his kids. I was almost soft at that moment, not from the wine, but from the fact that he admitted to me that he wanted me. It was worse than high school or my so-called crush in college. He put me in a difficult position, as Bill would say watching basketball. Will I break down and let him score, or will I resist and defend myself? I tried to defend myself. For the first time in my life, something that I desperately wanted years ago and thought was out of reach came back into my life to occupy at least a part of my heart, soul, and body. I was almost helpless to resist, but I tried. I really tried. Warren, I love my husband. You should know that. I can't betray him. He answered quickly, anticipating my hesitation. I know, and I wouldn't expect it from you. Then why are you telling me this? I won't resort to Sherlock Holmes methods this time, but it's really quite simple. I love you, Laura. I've loved you since the first day you dropped your books and blamed me for it. He smiled nostalgically. And here it is, lying there like a softball ready to be hit, or like a pregnancy-induced pause between us. The world seemed to stop for me for a moment, tilting off its axis. I was so confused. The thought that Warren loved me almost overwhelmed me. I started crying, which rarely happened in any business situation or even with Bill. Only when the stress or pressure of work, law school, or life reached its breaking point did I show my emotions privately. I pulled out some tissues from my purse, trying to stem the flow, but the tears flowed uncontrollably. When I came to my senses, I thanked Warren for lunch and returned to the office. Marcia looked at me and realized that something had happened. I brushed her off because I wasn't ready to raise her hopes that I could change my views on marriage. I was definitely confused. I knew what I had with Bill and would never intentionally hurt him. I knew I was entering dark territory with Warren if I let this continue. And yet I almost felt powerless to stop the inevitable disaster that was likely to happen if I continued. Closing the office door, I began to argue with myself. Do I really love Bill? Yes. Do I really want Warren? Yes. Do I really know Warren? No, I had to answer honestly. But still, I knew him. He seemed to be the same Warren I knew in college. He was purposeful, striving for success, certainly as handsome as I remembered him. He has become more mature with age. It is obvious that he has achieved success in his business. Has he set his goals for success with me? I couldn't answer this question. Then I thought about Bill again. If I had told him that I had lunch with an old college acquaintance, he would probably have asked me who it was. Would my behavior pass the spouse test? I didn't think it would go away. If the situation were reversed and Bill was having lunch with an old girlfriend he once had feelings for, what would I think about this? Nothing good, was my answer. I've already crossed the line. I could easily move the line in my mind, but Bill's line wouldn't move, and neither would mine if he did it to me. Guilt began to beat me like ribbons before an approaching hurricane. I felt sick. I grabbed my coat and left the office, telling Marcia that I didn't feel well. She probably ate something wrong for lunch. She seemed satisfied with this explanation, seeing that my behavior was strange when I returned to the office. Bill and I loved each other. It was true, at least as much as I admitted it myself. I loved Warren too. For the last 6 months, it felt like I was two completely different people. I will admit that Bill helped me get through law school and made me a better lawyer than I would have been without him. But Warren was the man I was supposed to be with. As Marcia said, the one who missed out. No, Warren was the one who didn't want me at the time, but I definitely couldn't say that now. He pursued me with a fervor I had never seen before. He didn't care at all that I was married. I was, and I felt guilty every minute of every day. Something had to change, otherwise I would have a nervous breakdown. By any definition, I had an emotional affair with Warren, fully aware of where it was leading. I'm sure Warren knew too. Lunch twice a week turned into occasional dinners. I refused to become intimate with Warren in any sense, even refusing his light touches over a meal or even a chaste kiss as a greeting or goodbye. My reserves cracked more every time I saw him. I needed to turn my guilt into positive actions to alleviate the feelings of betrayal that I constantly felt. I had to either firmly stop seeing Warren and commit myself to the marriage, or find a way to make Bill happy if I went to Warren. There was no doubt that my relationship with Bill was suffering as I went through the mental guilt acrobatics of seeing Warren, even though it was purely platonic. In my mind, it was a line. I had a platonic relationship with Warren. He was just another friend who happened to be a man and for whom I had strong feelings. Not very platonic according to any marital tests I knew. I started to hate myself. Bill noticed a change in my behavior. I really tried to put on an okay face with Bill. He accused me of this several times. I rejected this as additional stress from the partnership. I was a woman still in a man's world, even in the 90s, as a partner in a successful law firm. One evening I hinted that maybe we should consider planning a family, foolishly thinking that adding children to our relationship would strengthen our bond and help me gradually move away from Warren. Bill nearly ruined me that night when I brought up the subject over dinner at one of our favorite restaurants, Morton's Steakhouse. It seemed that he was now completely against children. He tried to calm me down, non-committing, maybe in the future. When we first talked about everything in life at a bar off campus, he made it clear to me that he fully supported children, which I considered an important aspect of any marriage. At the time in college, the topic simply ticked another positive box on my mental list of compatible partners. Bill's refusal to have children, or at least his cooling of the idea of children in our marriage, was probably what led me to seek the solution I came to. Bill hurt me with fewer words than I thought possible. He noticed this quickly, not because of my abrupt response to argue with him, but because of my complete silence throughout the rest of the dinner. He tried to console me with the offer of a trip to Europe, something we've been planning since law school. I could see Europe any time, but seeing it with children would be more fulfilling for me. No, the scales were now tipped not in Bill's direction, but in Warren's, who I knew desperately wanted children. He actually wanted to slow down his career aspirations and move on to family life, which I found touching. At least that's what he told me. The line moved again in my mind. Rationalization is a wonderful concept. It allows our subconscious to introduce concepts into our consciousness that we would not otherwise begin to logically. Maybe the heart wants what it wants. I simply encouraged my subconscious to give me a rational explanation of how I could have Warren without hurting Bill. Deep down, I wanted Warren. It was clear that he wanted me. If those 2 points were true, where did that leave Bill in the equation? Left in the cold if I breed it. Although his decision about the children hurt me, I couldn't just turn around and betray him out of spite. I still loved everything he did for me and with me. I assumed that one act of child abandonment caused me to fall out of love with Bill. It's not that I didn't love him. A potential solution came to me on the way to work on the Monday morning after our fateful dinner on Saturday. If I could imagine someone, not just anyone Bill's past love, maybe he would fall out of love with me. It's not easy to do, as I admitted, but it would greatly ease my conscience to think that if Bill was happy with someone else, then I would deserve my own happiness, right? Thinking about it, this was far more manipulative than I had ever been with anyone, especially someone I claimed to love. But if Bill had so easily given up on his promise to have children with someone he claimed to love, could I have tried to manipulate his feelings to make him fall out of love with me? Maybe that was my conclusion. The challenge was that I knew little or nothing about his past before he met me. I was so focused on my plan on the way to work that I barely noticed Warren sitting outside my office, clearly awaiting my arrival. Marcia stepped between us as I opened the office door. "Mr. Blaylock is here to meet with you, although he doesn't have an appointment. I told him he needed to call the office to make an appointment." I wasn't sure why Marcia was so formal. I could see Warren. I guess Marcia and I will have conversations later. Although he never came unannounced, it was not unwelcome given my day off. I was just as formal with Warren, mostly for Marcia's sake. "Mr. Blaylock, I only have a few minutes before my first appointment. It would really be best if you made an appointment so that I can give you all my time. It will only take a few minutes. Can we come to your office, please?" Perhaps Marcia felt vindicated that I supported her position that everyone needs records. I saw a slight smile on her face. Reluctantly, I agreed to spend a few minutes with Warren, led him into my office, and closed the door. "Thank you for meeting with me. I'll get straight to the point. I'm going away for a few months. I wanted to tell you in person." This sent a shiver through my heart. Quickly gathering myself, I asked, "Okay, why did you feel the need to tell me this in person?" "Plans here in Chicago are on schedule. We should be moving into a new building in less than 60 days. I have meetings scheduled with investors in Stuttgart with whom I need to discuss plans for a major expansion in Europe. After that, the business plan is practically completed. Warren, you don't owe me an explanation of your location or your business plans. Why are you telling me this?" "Laura, remember when I told you about my plans for college?" "Yes, vaguely, I think." "Let me refresh your memory. After I gain a foothold in the American market, I'm going to expand my operations to Europe. This is the last piece of the puzzle. If expansion from Chicago to the West Coast is successful, Europe will be the next step. This is the last piece. When this is completed, I plan to sell the company." "But Warren, you're only in your early 30s like me. What are you going to do?" "You have about 90 days or so to answer this question. Now I thank you for meeting without an appointment. Promise Marcia that I will be more attentive in the future. Oh yes, and one more thing. I love you, and I know that you love me for 90 days, Laura. I'll come back for the answer to your question." He kissed my cheek. He left, closing the door behind him. Once again, Warren left me breathless and stunned sitting in your own office. As soon as the door closed, Marcia knocked. "Come in," I said weakly. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost again. What's going on with Mr. Blaylock? You seem completely stupid when he's around." "Oh yes, and your meeting at 9 o'clock is here." Marcia was more right than I would like to admit, to her or to myself. I was thinking about something stupid on the way to work this morning. Now Warren apparently gave me some kind of deadline regarding something that I didn't know for sure, but could guess. He wanted to know where I stood regarding our relationship with him and Bill. Do I love him enough to leave my husband? And he gave me a deadline. It was annoying. It drove me crazy. I felt Warren's loss almost immediately after he left my office. It didn't make sense. If only, as he said, he knew that I loved him. Maybe I really love him on some level. No, I really love him, I admitted. "Please have my meeting at 9 o'clock, Marcia, and thank you. I think Mr. Blaylock will be making appointments in the future. He apologized and asked me to tell you. He just came and didn't want to waste a day or an hour." First item on the agenda was more details about my husband's past affairs. It would have been so easy to just call his sister Jonna and ask her, but since he was a transfer student, I never met his friends from Boise State, except in passing at our wedding. I didn't even remember their names. I could have checked the wedding guest list, but none of the angles I looked at made sense. Frustrated by the lack of progress by lunchtime, I called my mother. While her father earned money, she developed connections. She was the intriguer in the family. My father was a what you see is what you get man. My mother, on the other hand, was an iron hand in a silk glove. She could strike where you least expected, remove the glove, and leave no mark. I needed my mother by my side. Bill developed an attachment to my father. The more successful Bill became, the more my father liked him. I didn't need a split side in this decision. I'll leave it to my mother to convince my father. She was more than capable. I was away from my parents' house for several years, trying to establish myself in my career. After talking with my mother, not wanting to give away my plans over the phone, I invited myself to visit her for a few days. I said I haven't seen you for a long time because it was true. I told Bill about my upcoming trip. He didn't react much to this conversation, but wished me a good visit. The following Monday, I boarded a very early flight from Chicago to New York. The driver was still the same after all these years, although with much more gray in his hair. Arrival at the mansion was uneventful. My mother was sitting in the greenhouse admiring the roses and gardenias and drinking a mimosa at 11 in the morning when I arrived. The butler made me a mimosa at my mother's request. I forgot about some of the nice things that money bought in the lifestyle while I was working for a living. Cook, clean, and do everything herself. I felt more independent, but I missed the lifestyle my parents provided for me as a child. Hi, Mom. Nice to see you. And it's nice to see you, Laura. But you didn't come here to exchange pleasantries, so what's the real reason for your visit? Just like old times. Mom got straight to the point and knew something was going on. There's no point in trying to deceive her. I really wanted to know how crazy my idea was to try to get Bill to voluntarily leave our marriage so that I could more easily pursue my own happiness. If I say I have boy problems, will that make sense? My mother and I always spoke in riddles while I was growing up. This seemed like her normal mode of communication. Everything was masked by another meaning, sometimes several, depending on the situation. If I was obedient enough, she would help me. She dismissed the butler so we could be alone. Totally. Who did you meet and what did you do? Nobody knew. Do you remember in college I told you about a man who wanted nothing to do with me back then? She nodded, so I continued. He came back into my life after all this time. And you're not confused. You still want him. Why? Money? Power? Sex? It has to be one of the three. Actually, I guess I'm confused. That's why I'm here. His name is Warren Blaylock, and he's been confusing my life for the last 6 months. I fell silent. Laura, you're not confused. I can hear it in your voice. You're conflicted, and according to you, you haven't had sex with him yet, if I'm not mistaken. No, I didn't have sex with him. I have a great sex life with Bill. It's not about the sex, it's that I think I'll be happier with Warren than Bill in the long run. Why? You just said that Bill suits you in bed. You already have, will or could have as much money as you can spend in a lifetime. All that's left is power. Is Warren a powerful man? It was time to reveal the unpleasant details of the dinner with Bill a week ago. Bill doesn't want kids. Mom fell silent for half a minute, but it seemed to me longer. And this fact is only now coming to light. I thought that this issue was resolved before your engagement. Was I mistaken then, or were you? I quickly moved into my defense of my mother's attacks that I had somehow not checked the children's question before choosing a partner for life. Absolutely not. This is a complete reversal of position on Bill's part. In a more kindly tone, the mother said, "It's a shame. I'm sorry, dear." Pausing to think, "So how can I help you?" I explained my half-baked plans to my mother along with Warren's deadline. She nodded at the right times, but didn't say much until I was done. I'm surprised. I didn't expect something so difficult or treacherous from you, Laura. Coming from the mother's lips, this was high praise. Maybe my plan had a chance of success. Thanks, Mom. Do you think this will work? Oh my God, no. There are about 1,000 ways. This will probably fail, and only 1 or 2 that might work, but that's the fun of it. She smiled, with a sparkle in her eyes. I guess my mother was in on it. The game has begun. So what would you do? Well, I guess the first thing we need is more information about Bill, isn't it? He seems to have appeared out of nowhere at UCLA, but we both know that's impossible. I agree. Should I hire a private detective? No, I have someone else on my mind. Leave it to me. I'll make the call. You're leaving on Thursday, but I bet a martini is a real problem. Couples break up for various reasons all the time. This was a problem with a binary solution. If he doesn't want children, and I do, we won't have children. So he won and I lost. There is no compromise. There is no middle ground for discussion. If I somehow talked him into having kids and we had them, he would probably start to hate me and the kids in the long run. It's not something I want to risk. I suppose if I talked him into having kids, he might eventually come to love them, but I didn't like those chances. At lunch on Wednesday, my mother surprised me. She chose a large gazebo near the pool for lunch today. When I arrived, a man was sitting in the third seat. Mom introduced him as Henry Weinstein. She provided no further clues as to who he was or why he was attending the dinner. Let's all enjoy a nice lunch. Laura, honey, I'm ordering a martini for lunch. She and I both knew what that meant. Mr. Weinstein must have received information about Bill's past and was here to deliver it personally. As soon as you finish lunch, I'll be back. I'm sure you'll have a lot to discuss with Mr. Weinstein. After lunch, Mom excused herself to clean up. This was Henry's signal to open his briefcase, which contained a folder about 3 inches thick. I was amazed that it was possible to collect so many documents in 48 hours. This is yours, Laura, but important information summarized on the top 2 sheets. I'll let you read it and then answer any questions. I think the mother had already gone through the summary, so she chose to leave. We will discuss the findings later. I read 2 printed sheets that outlined Bill's boring childhood. Mother, father, sister got pregnant out of wedlock, but never married, a few friends from school, and finally the information I was really looking for. Tracy Shield was the name of a girl Bill was apparently very close to between high school and college. There was no way to know how close they were, but the report indicated they spent a lot of time together the summer before he enrolled at Boys State. She was a year younger than Bill, but later went to college and medical school to become a doctor. A children's doctor, in fact. Are there any current details on Tracy Shell? I asked Mr. Weinstein. He responded by taking the file from me and flipping through it until he found the page he was looking for. He handed me the sheet. It included her income, address, marital status, place of work, and many other details. One thing immediately caught my eye. Tracy's profession is a pediatrician. She must have loved children very much. If it was Bill's love before me and she wanted kids, it just won't work. I continued reading the details. It turned out that she spent 2 summers in the Peace Corps in different places, but the second summer in Africa. When she returned home early, it was because of illness. The report did not indicate what she contracted. Then I wondered how it was possible to get so much detailed information about a person so easily. This scared me, but I decided not to ask Mr. Weinstein any more questions. Thanks. I think I have everything I need. I called the butler to see Mr. Weinstein out and asked for a martini when he returned. After he left, the next step in my plan began to take shape in my head. Mom returned almost immediately after Mr. Weinstein left with a smile on her face. I'm guessing from your expression that Mr. Weinstein was helpful. I was. I think I should call the airline and see if I can stop in Memphis before heading back to Chicago. No need. I've already booked you on a 5 o'clock flight to Memphis and then a flight to Chicago tomorrow. It's all on my credit card, so if Bill ever gets access to your statements, he won't know anything. The little devil's smile appeared again on the mother's face. Now, what are you going to ask Miss Shelley? I remember why you always win at cards, Mom. You held all the cards. She smiled again, proud of herself, I guess. I know I'd like to ask her, but I doubt it will go smoothly. I thought about that too. The only conclusion I came to was to be completely honest with her. Call her and ask to meet. She would be interested in meeting the woman who married the love of her life at lunch tomorrow. Then just tell me everything exactly as you told me. You mean tell her I want her to introduce herself into Bill's life and try to seduce him? Well, not in those words, but yes, you have to present it as a proposal so that she sees the benefit in it, but you need to play on her emotions. Just like she probably feels for Bill, You feel for Warren. What could be wrong for two women to be happy with the men they desire? She has to be part of the game, though. What if she doesn't want to play? People are only motivated by money, power, or sex. You saw her income in the report, which is okay, but nothing outstanding. This could be the way to go. She's probably not interested in power, although that's possible. That's the last thing I'd try. We know she's single, so if she doesn't like women, which I doubt, she'll probably have a strong desire for sex with your husband. Mom, I can't believe you said that. Grow up, Laura. There aren't many 60-something women who wouldn't want sex with a 30-year-old man, especially one as attractive as Bill. I find it very helpful to stretch my legs every now and then. I can't believe we're having this conversation. My own mother wants my husband. Honey, my desire is one thing. I'm only half the equation. Bill's desire is another matter. I doubt Bill wants your mother, as you put it. At least he didn't last time I asked him. So you see, it takes two to tango, and that just won't happen with Bill. I was completely stunned by my mother's revelation that I had drunk my martini in one gulp. Mom seemed absolutely confident, as always. I left to pack my things. When she returned to say goodbye, Mom was sitting on a lounge chair by the pool, sipping another martini and reading a book. I was still very angry about her words about wanting to sleep with my husband. She knew it too. Laura, think about the end result. I doubt it's as complicated as you think. Things are never what they seem until you start peeling back the layers. I love you. Safe flight. I kissed her on the cheek, muttering goodbye. Tracy agreed to have lunch with me the next day. She was very wary. She suggested meeting at a small restaurant near the hospital where she worked. I arrived at the restaurant at 11:30. I wanted time to calm down, get a table, and prepare myself mentally for the conversation with Tracy. Tracy arrived promptly at noon. The hostess sat opposite me at a small table near the kitchen. It was the most private place the restaurant had to offer, which isn't much. I introduced myself as Tracy. She gave me a firm handshake. She was still very wary. "Listen, I think I know why you're here," she began. It stunned me. What I was going to ask her for was not even in my wildest dreams, and she could have guessed it herself. Then it dawned on me. My mother must have called Tracy. She knew it would be difficult for me to tell this idiotic plan. That's why she gave her speech before I left. I tried to put on a mask of calm on my face as anger seethed inside me at my mother for interfering. "So will you do it? You mean to seduce your husband with your permission so he'll fall in love with me? Of course. I can't think of anything I'd want more. He was my first love, but I think you know that. You surprised me." "Yes, all this surprised me too. But I understand why you want children. I understand that you told your mother that Bill doesn't want it. I'm sorry for that. For me too, if for some crazy reason Bill decides that we can be together. I absolutely adore children. Still, for the chance to be with him, I think I'm ready to sacrifice children." Tracy's frankness, as well as her desire to be with my husband, surprised me even more. Bill was attractive, yes. Successful, yes. "How much did she offer you?" I asked, knowing that it couldn't be that simple. "You mean how much money did your mother offer?" Yes, I knew she would probably offer money to close the deal. I just didn't know how much. "A lot. She told me to name my price. Once we talked and I got over the initial shock, I told her that if Bill was with me, I would be his forever with or without the kids. I never considered taking the money. I am not a woman of easy virtue. My virtue is not for sale." We ordered and had lunch, studying each other carefully. Me to understand why Bill might have been attracted to her in the past. She is, I guess, trying to understand what Bill saw in me. We were two completely different people. She was a doctor, I was a lawyer. Nothing in common. There was a medical conference in Chicago in a few weeks, which would be the perfect opportunity for Tracy to re-enter Bill's life. My task was to find a way to bring him there, or at least close to it. At the end of lunch, we exchanged mobile phone numbers. On the way home, I began to think of ways that Bill and I might accidentally run into Tracy in what seemed like a random setting. I thought about calling my mother to tell her that I was still angry at her for her desires for my husband and about the conversation with Tracy, but she already knew how I felt about her sexual desires for my husband. Plus, she had already planned the hardest part with Tracy. When I got off the plane, I thought about asking Bill to take me to dinner near Tracy's conference. Tracy could drop by after the conference and the meeting would be completely random. I would have to risk Bill recognizing Tracy after 10 years. Maybe I'd just be in the bathroom or taking a work call, as I sometimes did, and wouldn't be in the room when Tracy showed up. It could have worked. Then I would have to trust that she could flirt with him enough to get him interested. It was full of problems, but perhaps it was the best plan. I called Tracy from the car on the way back to the apartment and told her my ideas. She confidently said that she could work with this crude scheme. We agreed to talk several times over the following weeks to clarify times, locations, and any signals we needed to exchange. Tracy flew to Chicago the day her conference began. She settled into the hotel and called to say she was in the room. She said she had little interest in the conference and was mostly on standby, waiting for me to call if plans changed. Bill was going to take me to dinner at a new restaurant that had just opened near the hotel where Tracy's conference was being held, which he didn't know about. So far, everything was going according to plan. Then at 5 o'clock in the evening, Bill called the office and said he would be late. The big case he was working on suddenly changed. All my hard work depending on this chance encounter was in jeopardy. I told Bill it was okay, that I understood. We'll have dinner later. He said it might be very late, which made me furious. Damn it, Bill, why can't we put work aside for once for our own pleasure? If it's not my partner's job, then it's one of yours again. What I said was only partially true. I was angry that my chance at a chance meeting had been ruined. Sorry, Laura. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I got inspired. You should. You can take me to lunch tomorrow. I didn't want to push him too hard, but I didn't want to lose Tracy's closeness to Bill. I called Tracy and told her the situation. We agreed to repeat the performance at lunch the next day in the same restaurant. This time, everything worked out. Bill picked me up from the office. I made a reservation for noon on Thursday. Tracy was supposed to show up 15 minutes after us and meet by chance. I planned my trip to the toilet perfectly, as it seemed to me. Tracy walked in exactly at 12:45 as I excused myself to go to the restroom. I had to either rely on Bill's honesty to tell me when I got back or talk to Tracy later. Hopefully both. I gave Tracy about 7 minutes. We agreed on such a time in advance. Any longer would have seemed too long for my absence. Any less would have given her no time to work her charms. As it turned out, she was just leaving the restaurant when I returned. I was hoping that Bill had invited her to stay and have lunch with us, but that's how it turned out. Tracy turned around and smiled at me with a wink, indicating that she had successfully met Bill again. I experienced a brief moment of guilt, anger, and bitterness. Guilt for my manipulation, anger at Bill for accepting the attention so easily, and bitterness for Tracy for taking my husband, even with my permission. I still loved him. I never counted on the emotions involved. Bill saw the pain on my face. Are you okay, Laura? You look bad. Don't you feel good? Keeping the end goal in mind, as my mother said, I pulled myself together, showing a happy face. Yes, I got a call from the office while I was in the restroom. Sorry. What I said last night was less about you and more about us. What do you mean? I mean, it's either your job or mine interfering with our lives. I'm just tired of it, that's all. Let's have some wine with lunch. I don't have to go back to work until late. Maybe we could. I interrupted him. No, I need to go back to the office. See, that's what I'm talking about. Yesterday it was your job. Today mine is in the way. He nodded in understanding. We had a quick lunch, talking little. What I noticed was that he didn't mention meeting Tracy. Interesting. Maybe she was deeper in his heart than I thought, or maybe Tracy was better than I thought. On the way back to the office, I called Tracy on her cell phone. "So, how did it go?" "Better than we could have imagined. We're having lunch tomorrow before I leave, and thanks for giving me a chance with him. He's even better than I remembered." "Are you sure about that?" "Yes, I'm sure," I answered, but without joy. I really wasn't sure of anything. "Well, I've been trying to figure out why you want to give up on Bill, and I can't think of anything. You're either stupid or completely in love with this other guy. I don't think you're stupid, so it's probably the latter. Either way, I'll win if it works." Part of me was happy that the plan worked. The other part was angry at Bill for agreeing to have lunch with Tracy so easily. She was somewhat attractive in her compact figure. I didn't think she was as elegant as I was, but Bill clearly saw something in her. I kept reminding myself of the end goal. This is what I wanted, right? I was useless at work, wondering how everything would unfold at Bill and Tracy's lunch the next day. I left at 4, telling Marcia that I had a headache. She nodded in understanding. When I got home, I made myself a martini, finding that I liked them again after a few martinis at my mother's house. I had to play quietly at home. I had to play the unsuspecting wife, knowing that my own husband was being seduced by the woman I had set up for him. Any jury would have declared me insane and sentenced me to a mental hospital if they had known the facts. When Bill came home, I felt like I was checking his collar for traces of lipstick and smelling if he smelled someone else's perfume. The second martini I drank probably didn't help my paranoia. While Bill was changing, I undressed in the kitchen and then made 2 martinis. I carried 2 glasses into the bedroom as Bill was tucking his polo shirt into his shorts. He looked at me, then at the drinks. That was all it took. He threw off his shorts and tore off his shirt. I handed him his drink, and we clinked glasses. It didn't take me long to finish my 3rd drink, while Bill downed his almost immediately. We made love. It really reminded me of the old days in law school. At that moment, I realized that I really loved Bill. Kids or not, I really love him. I almost convinced myself that I could live without children. Perhaps it was the drink speaking in me. Then the image of my mother flashed into my mind, reminding me to think about the end goal. Can I have the man I love with a fantastic sex life and kids at the same time? Warren might be the total package, but of course I won't know unless I follow the plan. Can I really give up 2 of the 3 for a chance with Warren at the latter, the ultimate reward? Can I live with myself if I do this? Yes, I was committed to the course. I didn't know if Bill had been successful in seducing Tracy, and I was prepared for a dark mood the next evening, which never came. Instead, he was happy. Damn, how could he be so damn happy when I was so miserable? Maybe Tracy was more charming than I thought. Maybe she and Bill had an intimate dinner in her hotel room. He usually drank wine. I was waiting for him when he returned to the living room, and my drink was already half drunk. "Is everything okay, Laura? You seem to be drinking more than usual. And martinis, too. Was it the trip to your mother's that made you like them again? I'm going to drink some wine." "I guess so. Chinese food will arrive soon. Tell me about your day." I've already taken his untouched martini. This wasn't unusual. We usually relaxed over a glass of wine, telling each other about our day. This was our nightly routine. Bill was a little hesitant at first, which didn't surprise me. He now had secrets to keep. His life was no longer an open book. He had to be careful what details he shared with me. It was almost hilarious to watch him methodically test each statement in his mind before sharing it with me. Perhaps Tracy was more adept at using her charms than I realized. The food has arrived. We ate and talked about the day. I had no idea how lunch with Tracy went as she had to leave at 4, which didn't give me time to talk to her before she left. Bill didn't say anything about Tracy at dinner, which didn't surprise me. But it completely infuriated me that he entered into an affair so easily. I suppose the boundaries of his mind were also shifting. What have I done? I was shocked. Nice to see Tracy Shield in Chicago at a medical conference. She walked into the same restaurant where my wife and I were having lunch. And what's even more incredible is that my wife had just gone to the toilet. What were the odds? 1,000,000 to 1, I decided, after running through my probability and statistics exercises in my head. Once I got over the initial shock, Tracy made things even more difficult by asking for lunch the next day. This was her last day at the conference. She wanted to talk. Now I knew that the universe had taken a leap. The chances that this was a chance meeting and that lunch tomorrow wasn't planned were simply too great. I decided to play further to see how deep this deception would go. I agreed to have lunch with Tracy the next day at her hotel. Comfortable. One of the many questions I would like to answer is why. Why did Tracy choose to come into my life now? Has she been looking for me all these years? I had many thoughts I wanted to ask Tracy. My world began to shift from the center. She left before I could say anything. When I returned home that evening, Laura was clearly drunk. I could smell the gin on her breath when she kissed me. She offered to make a martini while I changed. I agreed. Less than 3 minutes later, she brought out 2 martinis, wearing red high-heeled shoes as if she were a cocktail waitress from a men's magazine. This was not our usual conversation over a glass of wine. This was different. I felt waves of guilt between us. Mine about Tracy, I wasn't sure about her. After several hours of the best sex I could say we'd ever had in our entire time together, the guilt almost overwhelmed me. Not because of the sex, of course, but because I didn't mention Tracy. It was a lie by default. I had no secrets to hide, and neither did Laura. Nothing happened between Tracy and I while Laura was in the restroom. If this was true, why did I feel guilty? We don't keep secrets from each other. At least nothing important, right? I couldn't stand the distance between us over nothing, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her about meeting Tracy or having lunch tomorrow. What did this say about the state of our marriage, I wondered? The next day lunch was almost comical. Almost. In fact, more like a sad tragicomedy, as it turned out. I casually watched Tracy's nervousness, not fully understanding why. She offered wine, perhaps to calm herself. As soon as it arrived, we told each other about our lives. Medical school for her, law school for me. Marriage for me, casual dating for her. Everything is very casual, but conversation and wine helped calm her nervousness. My hand was on the stem of my wine glass after a sip when she accidentally touched my fingers, making an accent. It was just a light touch, but it painted a clear picture. She meant something other than memories. What did I mean? She was, at the time, the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. Those old feelings started to come back to life. She was the one I would marry, have children with, and grow old with. We would live in a big house, wherever our careers took us. But I fell in love with Laura somewhere in my dreams of the past. Tracy hasn't changed much since the summer we had fun. I could see the determined woman she had grown into, even more attractive now as she talked about her life as a doctor. She had a gentle demeanor once she calmed down. Her smile was warm, as I remembered, sincere. Then she suddenly changed the topic of conversation. My mother told me you called that first summer back from college. I nodded, a little taken aback by her change in topic and tone. Tracy continued. I was a Peace Corps volunteer that summer, but you never called again. Why? It stunned me. Your mother made it clear that any attention towards you was unwanted. She told me that I hurt you when I left for college. I never wanted that. I said kindly, I know you didn't mean to, but you did it. I was devastated. I loved you then, and I still do. I never stopped. In fact, seeing you here today, even after all this time, brings everything back to these pleasant memories. She said it so simply, as if I should have known it all along. The way she showed her feelings so casually set off even more alarm bells in me. I tried not to show emotions. I had nothing to say. Tracy continued. Can you imagine what it would be like to be a couple? You, me, us. I imagined it. Neither of us knew what college would be like or the years we spent apart if we were together. But every night in South America or in Africa, I held on to the dream of you and me together. It kept me alive. Why are you telling me this? I collected myself a little. Bill, I'm going to tell you some things you don't know. It's going to hurt. And for all the pain I'm going to cause, I'm sorry. really, deeply sorry. I may not be psychic, but yesterday's chance meeting wasn't a coincidence, right? And today's lunch isn't just old friends reminiscing, right? A humble, knowing smile crossed Tracy's lips. No, no, there is no uncertainty about any of the events. Okay, so why are you here? Or did someone set this all up? Remember, I'm sorry, and I love you. Your wife Laura set this all up. A chance encounter, my request for dinner, to seduce you. I hope to make you fall in love with me as much as I fall in love with you. Tracy paused, giving me time to absorb her words before continuing. I had nothing to say. She, or rather her mother, first contacted me about a month ago. Laura flew to Memphis the next day. We had lunch. When I spoke to her mother, she offered me money if I went along with Laura's plan. Sounds like her mother. You know, she had the nerve. Doesn't matter now. Please continue. I want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. I had a lot of time to think about her mother's offer and Laura's plan. I knew that I would never take the money her mother offered. There was not even a decision to make. I may be desperately in love with you, but I am not a woman of easy virtue. But you did agree to Laura's plan, at least partially. You're here, right? I'm here, but that's really the only part I agreed with. Exposing your wife and your mother-in-law wasn't part of Laura's plan. It was my initiative, and to try to find out if there's any love left that I know you felt for me then. I know you felt it, but you never said it. Tracy, I feel like I'm in a spy movie and you're a honey trap. She laughed at my comparison. I'm flattered, but no, although seduction was part of Laura's plan, I only did it for my own selfish reasons. I told Laura that I would agree if I had the chance to be with you, but I fully intended to tell you everything from the beginning. I appreciate your honesty, and maybe I'm the one who should be flattered. I smiled at Tracy. Am I confused now? Tracy tilted her head. Hear me a minute. I guess she has someone. Or do you know? Yes, I don't know his name, but someone found her. Long frayed love, or so she said. A bit like us, right? Finding each other again. I emphasized found because it was a rig at best. Tracy looked a little guilty. I guess you can look at it that way. I don't know. It's all just devious and dishonest. So her plan was to get you to seduce me, just enough for me to leave her, or for her to find out, conveniently, from you about the affair, so that she could divorce me to be with her lover. Come to think of it, it's like her love for me to let me go easily. It eases her guilt. It's manipulative as hell. She really put it in those terms, I guess. I was just glad to get another chance with you. I didn't really care about her motives. I only cared about you, and I was going to tell you anyway. I could never betray you with a lie. Can I ask you a question? Please be honest with me. Do you think you could give me some time? Time to figure things out. That's a hell of a way to find out that your wife doesn't love you and wants a divorce. Tracy smiled. If you think there's a chance, I'll wait as long as it takes to be with you. I love you, Bill. Always have. It's not a game on my part. I really love you. I'm just angry that I was manipulated. I'm angry too, but not at you. Give me some time. Remember the promise you made when you left to study after our summer hobby. I remember. I said I would come back for you in the future. And here I am. A smile spread across her face. The timing may not be your choice or mine, but the future is now. At least it could be for us. Is that what you meant? At that time, yes, I answered honestly. And now? I think you know the answer to this question, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Tracy's smile widened, covering her entire face, touching her eyes, which relaxed as a tear slid down her cheek. We never got around to ordering lunch. None of us had an appetite. We drank a bottle of wine. Tracy had to catch a taxi to the airport. I promised to call her. We parted with a short kiss on the lips, which I returned without much resistance, given that my marriage was crumbling. Dinner tonight will be interesting, I thought. I wasn't going to give Laura the satisfaction of thinking I had something to hide. It might be better to go on the offensive. After the Chinese food arrived, with wine for me and a martini for Laura, we ate. We talked about our day. Why didn't you tell me that you never loved me, that you loved someone else? I expected more from you. I said this as factually as I understood it, almost in a whisper, when we were finishing dinner. Up until this point, I had kept my tone neutral. Laura pretended to be surprised, as if she didn't understand what I was talking about. What are you talking about? Tracy told me everything. At lunch. I challenged her. Who is Tracy? Please, Laura, don't insult my intelligence. Tracy told me all about your negotiations in Memphis. As soon as Tracy accidentally ran into me in the restaurant, I knew something was going on. But you need to be with your lover. I was calm on the outside, but seething on the inside. Yes, we probably should. Laura left it hanging in the air, allowing me to take it as I pleased. She looked defeated. You think you need what? I want to be with Warren. You don't know him. And no, we didn't have sex. I couldn't do that to you. So you claim that you have enough respect not to have sex with your lover, which I don't believe, but you can't look me in the eye and tell me it's over you've found someone else. Is that true? Basically, yes, I think. But it's not true. Please don't speak in riddles, Laura. Not now. This is not the time for conversations like you and your mother are having. Fair enough. His name is Warren Blaylock. I met him in college 2 years before you. He didn't want me then. Said he had other important things to do. And now he's back for you. How long has he been back? About 6 months, since I got the partnership. When Laura said this, I started screaming. You've been cheating for 6 months, bitch. Bill, stop. That's not true. There was nothing between me and Warren other than a few lunches and dinners. Nothing sexual happened. I refused to be intimate with Warren until... I interrupted her. So he's back in your life, and you want a divorce so you can be happy with someone you barely know. Maybe you've lost your sanity. I don't know what I want. Yes, maybe that's what will happen, but I wanted you to be happy too. Do you understand what Tracy was for? You came up with this elaborate plan to introduce Tracy and have her try to seduce me. She told me everything, Laura. Unlike you, she was honest, at least. But you weren't honest with me before we became exclusive. You said you wanted kids. I want to, just not right now. I paused to collect my thoughts. Oh, I get it. Warren wants kids, a fence, suburban life, all that domestic idol. Well, I know he wants kids, but you don't. She said it so mercilessly that it tore my heart. Since children became a deciding factor, and why now? Bill, my clock is ticking. It's time. So that's it. You've already left the marriage. And from then on, when do you decide when we have kids or who I should be with? The sheer brazenness of her manipulations was almost too much to comprehend. Of course not, although now you probably don't think I respect and love you, which I can understand, but I really wanted to see if there was something left between you and Tracy. According to her, she loved you then. You never mentioned her, so it might have been a long shot, but I had to try. So what now, Laura? I guess we could try couples therapy if you want to save the marriage. But do you really want to stay with me knowing the truth? I should have known you'd turn into your mother. No, I could never trust you. I'm really not sure I even love you now, let alone love you. This will all work out the way you wanted, no right. Are you going to be with Warren? The spoiled little princess always gets what she wants. I never meant to hurt you. Yet, you and your mother planned this plot so that I would cheat on you. How is that love? It may not seem like love, but do you understand why I wanted you and Tracy to get back together? As a way to alleviate your guilt or as grounds for divorce? Of course. I answered quickly. But could you ever see it from my point of view? A way to make you happy. I really love you, Bill. Otherwise, I wouldn't go through all these lies to try to get you and Tracy together. It might seem terrible, I know, but all I really wanted was for you to have someone, even if it's just a friend, to help you move on. You love me enough to let me go like an old pair of shoes to update your wardrobe. I don't need that kind of love. Not from you. I'm sorry, Bill. I really am. I know I hurt you, and I'll feel guilty about it for the rest of my life. But I need to see where life with Warren takes me, and I really want kids. I was hoping that you'll feel the same about Tracy, and maybe in time, but I see now you don't. Well, I think we're almost done. Let the lawyers sort it out. I'm staying at the hotel tonight. I'll pick up my things tomorrow. Go to Warren. Now you can sleep with him and not feel guilty. I thought about calling my mother, but she would have said, "I told you so." I didn't need to hear it. I thought about calling Warren, but I didn't have his number in Europe. I have never felt so alone in my life. Bill had just left, but I already missed him. I threw him away for a chance with someone who ignored me when we first met. How stupid could I be? Pain and guilt ate at me like cancer. Luckily, there was only half of the gin left in the bottle, otherwise I probably would have died of alcohol poisoning that evening. Well, I made this bed, now I need to sleep in it. I thought about calling Bill right before I passed out on the couch. Luckily, the phone was in the kitchen, and I was too drunk to reach it. I wanted him back. I wanted everything as before, like it was on a Friday night with Chinese food, wine, bad melodramas, cuddling with my husband on the couch. Instead, I had tears, loneliness, and guilt, with more tears to continue the cycle. I booked a hotel near the office before going home. I knew I wouldn't stay in the apartment after our dinner conversation, knowing the outcome. The betrayal, the feeling of inadequacy, along with all the other useless emotions I had been experiencing throughout the day and evening, threatened to overwhelm me as soon as I settled into the hotel room. I didn't allow it. I didn't do anything wrong. I wanted children at some point, just not now. The thought of children who will grow up to be as two-faced as Laura makes me sad now. Disgusts. Laura me is disgusted. My anger flared at Laura, and then I thought about Tracy. I didn't know what to think about Tracy. She told me the truth, at least. She was the one who brought the news of betrayal. Maybe, as Laura implied, she was doing me a favor by contacting Tracy to be the messenger of the situation with my marriage, even though that was not Laura's original intention. I felt betrayed by Laura, but Tracy conveyed this message with the same kindness as a promise to love me no matter what. Maybe it made me feel better that Tracy was the messenger. The message and result, although unified, were clear. Laura and I are done. Tracy and I are on pause until this is resolved. Sitting in the hotel bar downstairs, I thought about calling Tracy to let her know the battle was over, but I didn't want to give her false hope, thinking that Tracy and I would pick up where we left off at the end of that summer so many years ago. She deserved better than revenge sex or a rebound relationship. Summer romance. I remembered the good times we had together. She, an inexperienced high school student, and I, a freshman with dreams. I remembered how stoic she was that last weekend before I left for college. I really didn't want to hurt her, I meant those words, but the dice were cast months before I asked her to dance at that high school party. Our destinies were destined not to lead us together. Instead, our paths were destined to diverge, at least at that time. Is it time to unite again, like two winding streams merging into a mighty river? Time will answer this question. I put Laura out of my mind and turned the entire divorce process over to our internal affairs expert at the firm. If Laura wanted to handle her own divorce, that was her business. Not only would I never be my client, but I would not respect any lawyer who would become one. She hired a lawyer, which was good for both of us. Our lawyers simply completed the paperwork. The divorce was not hostile thanks to the prenuptial agreement. Irreconcilable disagreements cover many things. That was as good a reason as any, I suppose. One day I'll talk to Laura again, but not any time soon. It was about a month after the divorce was finalized when I received the email. It was from an address I didn't recognize until I read the headline, "Still waiting." It didn't take more than one guess for me to figure out who it was from. I immediately picked up the phone and dialed the number. Tracy answered the first call as if she had been waiting for me. Now, looking back, I understand that it was so. She was waiting for me, as she promised over lunch that fateful day. I have a flight planned to Memphis for next weekend. Tracy restored my self-esteem and damaged my ego, which has recently weakened noticeably. Once the catharsis of the divorce wore off, it seemed like the 10-year separation meant nothing to either of us. Although in many ways I felt like I wasted those years with Laura. I graduated from law school, passed the bar exam, and became a successful lawyer. Tracy's practice in pediatrics flourished. I had never seen Tracy as happy as the day I moved into her house after driving from Chicago to Memphis almost every weekend. Tracy never allowed my sometimes sullen behavior to interfere with the growing relationship we enjoyed. She truly was my first love, and I was hers, as she often reminded me. She made me feel deeply loved, like a treasured piece of art, something she could never part with. Something I can now look back on and say Laura never did. I felt the same way about Tracy. I never returned to Chicago. A year later, after the divorce was finalized, I called Laura. I heard that she and Warren got married shortly after our divorce. I congratulated her, then invited her to my wedding to Tracy. I think after her surprise to hear me on the other end of the phone, her explosive laughter at the news of our wedding overcame the tension that the situation dictated. We talked for about 5 minutes before she said she was going to give birth to her first child in a month. I shared similar news with Laura. Tracy was expecting twins in 7 months. She seemed distant suddenly. But I never said I didn't want kids, Laura. Come to the wedding if you and Warren can. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.